Welcome to Sizzle Fantasy Sports, the channel with the most sizzling hot fantasy takes and analysis, presented by your host, Gavin.
Rodgers clean pocket, throws the middle to Gibson, touchdown, and a dagger!
How's it going, fantasy players? I'm Gavin, back with SFS and SizzleFantasy.com, here to talk about some breakout players for 2021 fantasy football. These are guys who last season, maybe they were under the radar plays, sneaky waiver wire ads, or late round draft picks, but this season, I see them stepping up to the plate and filling some major shoes in your fantasy football lineup. So make sure before we get into today's video, you head down and click that subscribe button and turn the bell on so you never miss an episode here on the channel. Also, some big news, my top 60 Dynasty rookie profiles and rankings are now completed, so we're one step closer to finishing off that Dynasty draft guide and getting that redraft guide really started up here and underway. So I'm almost done. That's almost ready to go. The Dynasty guide and right now the redraft guide are both in a pre-order phase where you're getting content as soon as I can get it put out to you. But that Dynasty collection is almost done and ready to go. So go check that out and get yourself one of the SFS draft guide kits for the 2021 season. But without further ado, let's get into this. 8 breakout players, 1 or 2 at every position here for 2021 fantasy football. We're starting out with quarterbacks today, and my first name up on the board is Jalen Hurts, the starter. Well, I guess Nick Sirianni won't call him that, but Jalen Hurts nonetheless for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a player who I think is going to end up having the chance to finish as a quarterback 1 for the 2021 season. He's got really nice upside, and this is the situation we go over every year with the new rushing and the new dynamic quarterback. We've got ourselves in a starting role, and it honestly tends to work more often than not. When you've got QBs that can add their legs and add a dynamic level to the offense and get you fantasy productions outside of the traditional or the stereotypical way and method of doing things, that's where you can kind of zig when everyone else zags, get yourself those top-end players, and find some really nice sleepers late in the draft. That's what Jalen Hurts is here. I don't think people realize he only had a handful of starts last season, and he had 357 rush yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in those performances. So he did throw his fair share of interceptions. He was 6 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions. That's fine. He's going to make up for that with his legs. He's going to be running not only read option, but he'll also be just scrambling and improvising, getting out of the pocket next year. So there's some more stuff to work with him as well this season, and that's another thing I find very encouraging for Jalen Hurts' fantasy numbers this year. You add in Devontae Smith at the top of the draft board. They actually traded up to go and get him. That's a receiver 1, and as long as he can overcome the question marks about his weight and just being a competitive player at the next level in the National Football League, Hurts will finally have someone to consistently throw the ball to, and a player that will command targets in this offense. That's what they're really lacking right now, because last season Jalen Reagor was good for splash plays, and hopefully he improves coming into year 2 now. But they were really looking for a guy who could come in there and just be a consistent face and a dependable player for this offense. So that's something to look forward to for Jalen Hurts. Another thing they added was Kenneth Gainwell, mid-round running back. He can use him in the slot and whatever. So you've got some nice pieces there in Philadelphia. They've got Dallas Goedert coming back as well as a consistent threat at the tight end position. I don't think Zach Ertz will be a face back on this team next year, as he kind of sat out of camp this offseason, because I think he's expecting to be traded, or at least just like everyone else is expecting that too. So there's some interesting stuff still going on in Philadelphia here, but nonetheless, Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that's got a ton of upside for this season, and honestly a really nice floor as well. And I think that's again something that's going to end up being slept on here, is the fact that quarterbacks, even who just run around a little bit and use their legs to get you some production, that's cheap and easy points. That's like running back level production here, and that's where all the Lamar Jackson jokes started from, because of how much he was running the ball. He would have games north of 100 yards, and you're looking at 10 raw points right there without touchdowns or anything else. So there's a lot of good stuff that can come from Jalen Hurts' play style. If he can, develop his arm and become a better passer and an actual quarterback, we might see the interceptions come down. Maybe the touchdown to interception ratio evens out a bit, and we see some really nice things from him here. So Hurts is a player to keep your eye out for as a mid-round quarterback that could end up being your QB1 here this season, because like I said, really, really nice upside, and those legs give him a safe floor as well. And my next quarterback up here that I see as a breakout player is actually somebody who's somewhat established, and that's Ryan Tannehill for the Tennessee Titans. Finished as QB9 last season. Some things I don't think people realize: 7 rushing touchdowns last year. That's pretty impressive. That's a lot higher than a lot of NFL quarterbacks are at. He's a player that can use those legs. He played wide receiver in college, actually, and then transitioned to quarterback in the NFL. So he's athletic. He's able to get things done there, and he's a player you can depend on to get you some sneaky points and stuff when it's given to him in that phase of his game. And then he had 33 passing touchdowns a season ago as well. And maybe that's something that doesn't really improve from last year, but I think what will improve is his passing yardage total. You add in a Julio Jones to this offense alongside an A.J. Brown, boom, 2 wide receiver ones right there. Derrick Henry, 2,000 yards rushing last season. That number is going to come down, but what is not going to go away from this offense is the fact that Derrick Henry is going to set up a massive play-action game for this team this season. 3,800 yards passing is all Ryan Tannehill had in 2020, but when you add in the fact that he's going to be able to have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones to sail deep balls to off of the play-action game set up by that rushing attack, that's going to increase. Maybe he doesn't see 5,000 yards because that's a bit extreme for a team that wants to be a run-first option, but maybe he gets closer to that 4,500 yard marker. Maybe it's a relatively steady improvement and he settles in somewhere around 4,200, 4,300 yards. But regardless, I think the touchdown count is going to stay relatively the same to where it was at last season, because you look at having now 2 wide receiver ones on each side of the field, and then the fact that you're going to be able to have that extra added element of efficiency and take the top off of the defense capability here. It's going to be a really good situation. Ryan Tannehill is absolutely just like a Jalen Hurts. They're both pretty much sleepers at this point, and they are rising up draft boards. They are seeing their draft stock, improve. But these are both guys that if you want to fade the quarterback position early, go out there and get them, because they can give you top 12 production at a position that's very, very deep for a really nice price on draft day or in the trading market if we're talking Dynasty here, if that's what you're tuning in for today. So moving on to the wide receiver position, Russell Gage is a player I am super excited about now after Julio Jones leaves Atlanta. So 2 players in a row here impacted by that Julio Jones trade. Russell Gage actually saw 109 targets last year, only 786 yards and 4 touchdowns came from it, but 106 targets nonetheless. For a young player who's still trying to find his place in the league, he can be pretty darn productive and efficient here with that wide receiver 2 role now under his belt. So he played it a bit last season. He adjusted. He figured out what he's got to do different here, and he's had an offseason to work and build upon that. Now he's officially going to be that wide receiver 2 day one. They added Kyle Pitts. That's fine. We're talking about wide receivers here. So Matt Ryan, still the same quarterback he had last season with those numbers. He's got a level of trust and familiarity with that spot now. So Russell Gage is going to come out here this season. Maybe he doesn't see 109 targets. Maybe it's 120, 125. Calvin Ridley is going to be a beast and a target hog. That's where the defenses are going to be looking, and they're also going to be peeping over there at Kyle Pitts. So what they're not going to be looking at is Russell Gage. Don't sleep on him. He's going to find one-on-one coverage frequently, and he's good enough to beat that. He'll put up some really nice weeks this season, and honestly, if you can snatch him up in the middle rounds of fantasy drafts, he might be a league winner this year because of how good that upside is here moving into this next spot. Then Jerry Jeudy is my next player up on the board for the Denver Broncos. And to be quite honest, he had a putrid rookie season. He was absolutely, I don't want to say he was terrible because the expectations were so high, which is really what made it feel like it was so terrible. 113 targets, only netted him 52 receptions. That's only good enough for a 46% catch rate. That's not cutting it. Under half the time he was throwing the ball did he actually make the reception and complete the catch. He needs to be better than that. We know he's more talented than he showed last season. We know that he has a lot more in him than he was able to show last year. But rumor has it, Teddy Bridgewater, Jerry Jeudy getting things kicked off to a hot start. They've got themselves a good connection, it sounds like, in training camp, which is really encouraging to hear. I think that a quarterback change, it's looking like Teddy B, and I think he should be their starting quarterback because Drew Lock is kind of off the rails and a little bit too unpredictable for my liking. Nonetheless, though, if Jeudy can come out there and compete with Cortland Sutton for the top team target share, that's something that's going to be a big improvement in year 2. The hands, those were a big question mark last season. A lot of people bashed on Jerry Jeudy's drops and his inability to catch the football consistently. That's something that's going to get better. Look at Devontae Adams. He was a player that Packer fans were saying to cut after his second season in the league because his drops were so bad and because he couldn't consistently catch the ball. They stuck with him. Now he's a top 2, top 3 wide receiver in the National Football League. And if you ask me, He ain't 2 or 3. So Jerry Jeudy's going to come out here. He's going to prove a lot of doubters wrong, and a lot of people are going to sleep on him in fantasy drafts for that reason. So I think he'll come out here. If he sees that same target total, which it's a bit iffy if it will stay the same because Courtland Sutton will be coming back from that big leg injury. But nonetheless, if he can just become more efficient and more productive with those same opportunities that he was given, we're expecting big things out of Jerry Jeudy here in year 2, and this should be a pretty darn good fantasy situation for the first-round pick in 2020. Then into the running backs here, Antonio Gibson. This is going to be a player I talk about a lot this offseason. Gibson is looking like he's in for a monster season here. There's really nobody else in the Washington backfield that can compete with him for opportunities, touches, and overall volume. He is the best player as a pure rusher on this football team, and he's also the best player. I guess it's debatable between him and J.D. McKissic, but being that Antonio Gibson played wide receiver in college and was good enough to transition to running back, I'm pretty comfortable saying he's also the best receiving threat out of the backfield on this team. And when J.D. McKissic does his work as a receiver, it typically tends to not even be out of the running back spot. They'll just flat out split him out wide and put him in the slot. So Gibson is super dynamic. Missed some time last season, had a foot injury, still finished as running back 13. So Ron Rivera has talked about increasing his workload here in 2021, expecting more things, more usage out of him, and a big jump from him here in year 2. So as a player who's going as a mid to late second round pick right now, I could not be smashing the draft button quicker on him. I think inevitably by the end of the season, there are a lot of running backs I like up there at the top of the board, but I think he'll end up putting up running back 1 numbers just because of how well and how the totality of his game is being used on the Washington football team. They're really getting everything out of him that they possibly can because they're using all of his skill sets very, very well there. I think he'll have a big season here in 2021. And then lastly here, Cam Akers. Well, we've got the tight end position, but the last running back I'll talk about in today's video is Cam Akers for the Los Angeles Rams. Again, if you've been tuning into any of my previous videos here on the channel, we've talked about a lot about running backs in the past week here, and Cam Akers is a player I absolutely love. So Akers coming in with the Rams, this is going to be a situation with Matt Stafford now where I expect this entire offense to be more efficient, more productive, put up more fantasy points. Akers is going to be a direct beneficiary of that. There's going to be more goal line carries, more third down conversions. They're going to stay on the field longer. He's going to ultimately be leading late in football games because the Rams are a very good team, that they're going to be winding on that clock, running the ball late, trying to get the thing wrapped up and sealed away. So Akers is in a very, very beneficial fantasy situation this year. It's a really balanced attack. Sean McVay, the boy genius as he's been called throughout his career, one of the best play callers in the league right now. So a lot of things going in favor of Cam Akers, and he's a player you can get at the very end of the first round. So a lot of value to be had here. He's going to break out. We saw what he could be for the last month of the season roughly last year, and into the actual NFL playoffs. He was fantastic against the Packers and the Seahawks. So we've seen it. We believe it. And Sean McVay, what he told us at the end of last year is it's the Cam Akers show now, and we can count on him to be the guy going forward in this offense and a 3-down workhorse back who is going to go out there and be a monster in fantasy this season. Moving into tight ends now, the last position up here on the board, TJ Hockenson is my first tight end. And you might be thinking to yourself, how, Gavin, is a tight end 4 finisher from last season now going to be a breakout in 2021? How much better can he really get? And am I expecting him to be Travis Kelce this season? Absolutely not. But TJ Hockenson, I believe, is 100% the best pass-catching option on the Detroit Lions roster right now. Their wide receiver core is miserable. You look at Brashad Perryman and Tyrell Williams as the top 2 options, and then Quintez Cephas as the third one. No. TJ Hockenson is the best passing threat, and honestly, the best passing threat might be DeAndre Swift out of the backfield, but the best guy who's going to line up as a receiving threat 100% of the time in passing down situations, yeah, he's a tight end. He'll stay in block every once in a while. We get that. TJ Hockenson is a very well-rounded player, and one of his strengths coming out of college was his ability to be used as both a receiving and a blocking tight end. Nonetheless, TJ Hawkinson's target share in 2020, only 18% of this offense. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see that go north of 20%. and maybe even into the low mid-20s. This is going to be a player that is going to get a lot of passes from Jared Goff. We've seen him throw to Tyler Higbee as a member of the Rams and rely on other tight end threats like Gerald Everett in that offense. He's going to need someone to throw the ball to. This offense is really lacking skill players and people that are capable of putting up decent production. 67 receptions only in 2020, 723 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think all three of those categories will go up. I think TJ Hockenson might get around 80 receptions. I would expect, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's around 1,000 yards receiving. And then if he cracks double-digit touchdowns, I'm not going to be surprised once again either. So I'm expecting massive things from TJ Hockenson in 2021. I think he'll finish higher than a Mark Andrews even. I think maybe, depending on how many games George Kittle can end up suiting up for next year, he could potentially finish hotter than Kittle does next year. If George Kittle plays the full season, then probably not. But in the event that both of these guys are out there for the majority of the time, I just think the sky's the limit for Hockenson this year. I don't see many other avenues for Jared Goff to get rid of the football with here. And he's got to throw the ball to somebody, like I said. So Hockenson, big things this season. And my last breakout candidate, and again, I'll be doing videos. I'll probably, in the future, just do like breakout running backs 2021 fantasy football. Today, I just wanted to sprinkle in some names at every position, get this thing kind of kicked off here, and start a little mini-series here on the channel. So, Irv Smith, the last guy on the board here. What's the big kicker to make Irv Smith break out this season? Well, Kyle Rudolph, who was virtually always on the field for the Vikings, is now gone. He was mainly a blocker, not a receiving threat, but nonetheless, he was still out there, and Irv Smith had to try and produce while Rudolph was still on the field. Irv Smith's a really good move tight end, and we saw that at Alabama. Very productive receiving the football and being a player after the catch. He'll finally get to unleash that part of his game and be the top option in this offense. So 5 touchdowns last season, not even the starter in the offense. Like I said, that was Kyle Rudolph's job. He was out there a lot more than Irv Smith was. Now we can finally see him in action. So a really balanced offense, 2 really good receivers that take attention away from him, and Dalvin Cook, of course, who is probably the biggest factor in this offense. Nonetheless, Irv Smith should be a top 12 tight end finisher in 2021 fantasy football because of how depleted of talent this position is and how hard it is to find a guy who is truly a receiving threat rather than some sort of a blocking receiving hybrid. Alrighty, those are some breakout candidates at all of the positions in fantasy football. If there's anyone you disagreed with on this list, let me know down in the comment section. If there's anyone you would add onto this video, let me know that as well, and maybe you'll see them in a future video. So, thank you so much for watching today's video. I appreciate you guys and all of your support. I'll see you all next time. Peace.